Hello there, my name is Luciano Oliveira. I am a Brazilian attorney, and today we're going to be talking about birth certificate, a major requirement for the Brazil Digital Nomad Visa application. The birth certificate is probably the #1 document causing trouble to foreign citizens applying for the visa. And the reason for that is there are several steps for your birth certificate to be legalized, to be validated before you can actually present to the Brazilian immigration. We'll be talking about each of those steps, but before we get to that point, let's remember, if you have your parents' names on your passport, you don't need to provide the birth certificate. Unfortunately, most of the applicants are not gonna have their parents' names on their passport, and therefore they are gonna need to go through all of those steps. So the first step is to get the so-called Apostille, and you can see an example of an Apostille over here. An Apostille is gonna be a document that is provided by the state where your birth certificate was issued. This Apostille basically says that the document is legit. So it does not matter how many stamps you have on your original birth certificate, you're gonna need the Apostille on top of whatever you have. Another nuance is that by original birth certificate, we don't mean the same birth certificate that was issued when you were born decades ago. We are talking about a birth certificate that was issued by Department of Health in charge of birth certificates in your native country. So as long as this document has been issued by the proper authority, that's what the Brazilian immigration is gonna interpret as an original birth certificate. So first thing, it gotta be an original birth certificate. Second thing, it needs the Apostille. After you get the Apostille, you're gonna send this document to us in Brazil or to whoever is assisting with your application to be sworn translated. A sworn translation is a special type of translation that is provided only in Brazil. Sworn translation is not the same thing as certified translation. Sometimes we see clients in the US, like they wanna be very expedient, they wanna do things fast in order to get their application in, and then they reach out to a company in the US, and the company in the US says, well, of course we do certified translation, and here it is. But a certified translation is not the same thing as a sworn translation. And again, sworn translations, they are provided only in Brazil. So once your birth certificate arrives in Brazil, we handle the sworn translation, and finally this document is going to be valid and acceptable by the Brazilian immigration. There is a distinction worth mentioning. Most of the countries nowadays, they are member of the Hague Convention for the Apostille. And this convention basically says that whenever a country joins the convention, they are going to be issuing apostilles and they are going to be accepting documents with an apostille from other countries. However, some countries, they are still not a member of such convention. There is a number of them, but just to give you an example, the United Arab Emirates are not a member of the Hague Convention on Apostille. That means that if you are in Dubai, for instance, you're not going to be able to get an apostille because there is no such a thing in this country. In this case, you're going to need to have your birth certificate legalized by the Brazilian embassy in Abu Dhabi. So it's not like an option. If there is the apostille, apostille is the way to go. But if you are in a country where there is no such a thing, then the only path available for you, it's going to be taking your document to a Brazilian consulate or a Brazilian embassy, depending on where you are, and get like the consular stamp on your birth certificate. Once you get the consular stamp on your birth certificate is going to be ready to be sent to Brazil for the sworn translation and then to the Brazilian immigration for your application. There is also this type of question we hear sometimes, like the client says, all right, but if I sent you like just a scanned copy of my birth certificate with the Apostille, can't you just go ahead and do the sworn translation? So in theory, yes, it is possible to handle documents in a scanned manner. However, because you may need the physical sworn translation and the birth certificate later on, we would rather handle your documents physically, so you're gonna have both documents linked to each other, because the sworn translator, once he gets the Apostille birth certificate, he's gonna actually attach to the sworn translation, and then you're gonna be a fully valid birth certificate in Brazil. If you are doing that remotely, the Brazilian immigration is still gonna accept the two separate documents, but in our experience later on, for instance, if you decided to buy a property in Brazil, because you did those things remotely, there is a good chance that the registry in charge of real estate, they are not gonna accept your birth certificate. Understanding you should be doing this right the first time, so you don't need to keep repeating this cycle over and over during your journey in Brazil. I hope this video was helpful. Don't forget to download our ebook, The 7 Most Common Mistakes by Foreign Citizens when Applying for the Digital Nomad Visa, and follow us for more tips.